The Bible reading for my reflection this morning comes from Genesis chapter 22, beginning at verse 1. It's one of those stories that probably raises as many questions as it does give guidance, hope for us. So let me read it to you. After these things, God tested Abraham. He said to him, "Abraham," and he said, "Here I am." He said, "Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains that I will show you." So Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him and his son Isaac. He cut the wood for the burnt offering and set out and went to the place in the distance that God had shown him. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place far away. Then Abraham said to the young men, "Stay here with the donkey. The boy and I will go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you." Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. So the 2 of them walked on together. Isaac said to his father Abraham, "Father?" And he said, "Here I am, my son." He said, "The fire and the wood are here, but where's the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham said, "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." So the 2 of them walked on together. When they came to the place that God had shown him, Abraham built an altar there and laid the wood in order. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to kill his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, "Abraham, Abraham." And he said to him, "Here I am." He said, "Do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me." And Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught in a thicket by its horns. Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called the place, "The Lord will provide." As it is said to this day, "On the mount of the Lord it shall be provided." This has to be one of the strangest stories from Abraham's life. As an old man, Isaac is finally born to him. And then after a time, we get to this story. It must have been at least a number of years later, as Isaac was old enough to carry all of the wood that was needed for the altar to build a fire that was big enough for him to be laid upon, as God had told Abraham he was going to have to do. Abraham just carries the fire and the knife. Isaac carries the wood for the fire. How could Abraham do this? How could he? How could he even contemplate sticking that knife into his own son, his only son, his son born into his old age? Perhaps he was genuinely convinced, as he told Isaac, that God would provide the sacrifice. Or was he simply unable to face telling his son he was to be the sacrifice, as we so often try to protect our children from things we find difficult to tell them? He gets as far as tying up his son, placing him on the wood, ready to burn. He picks up the knife, and God speaks into the situation, and everything changes. It's Abraham's faith which is noted, Abraham's determination to follow God's instructions, Abraham's conviction that God knew best and would provide, they are the focuses that we look back on frequently when reflecting on this passage. I have to say, I can't really comprehend God using such an horrendous demand on Abraham as the means for testing his faithfulness. I can't comprehend the trust of Isaac, who's already asked what was to be sacrificed, and yet gets tied up on the altar and just accepts it. I mean, I'm imagining that Abraham was into his extreme old age, not at his strongest. Isaac, strong enough to carry enough wood to make a meaningful altar, big enough to place him on. Surely he could have resisted. And yet the story implies nothing but acceptance. Acceptance both from Abraham of what God is telling him to do, and acceptance by Isaac that somehow this was going to work out despite the fact his father's tied him up and put him on the altar. So I find it difficult to ignore these things, despite the resulting message about faithfulness, about trust in God by Abraham and in his father by Isaac. Important messages, but such a strange, almost chilling or even horrendous request by God, and accepted by Abraham and Isaac, at least as the story presents it. Now I realize that cultural and social contexts come into play when trying to understand passages like this from hundreds, thousands of years ago. And I'm not going to try and analyze them in this reflection, but I want to make a few observations. I'm not likening experiences many of us will be able to reflect upon from our own lives, from within our own lives, of the experiences of Abraham and Isaac within this story. I'm not likening the experiences, but I'm pretty sure most of us will be able to call to mind incredibly difficult experiences that made no sense to us, that challenged our faith, or maybe in going through them demonstrated to us that faith can remain strong despite the inexplicable experiences that become part of our lives. For me, the death of our daughter Sam's baby Ezekiel falls into such an experience. In many ways incomprehensible to Wendy and to me, but God remains a constant strength. For many, even this current experience or their current experiences of the coronavirus may well feel as inexplicable in the context of a God who professes love for humanity, and in particular for those who trust. Despite how it sometimes feels, and if you are at one of those places in your life, God does remain faithful through those totally inexplicable times in our journey through life. However you are feeling, hold tight. And if things are okay for you, but others who are close to you are going through difficult times, be an encouragement to them. Let your faith be a strengthening faith for them. Stand near to them and enable them to trust just a little more, even in the fearful times. Trust that, as Abraham declares, the Lord will provide. And so, may God's love surround you, God's Spirit guide you, God's whisper cheer you, God's peace calm you, God's shield protect you, God's wisdom arm you, wherever God may lead you. Amen.